For the first time in decades, a frontline Japanese warship is being quietly stripped of its weapons. No missiles, no torpedoes, no combat loadout. This is not routine maintenance. This is not an accident. This is preparation. The ship is JS Sendai, hull number DE-232, an Abukuma-class destroyer escort of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. And what is happening to this vessel may be one of the clearest, most concrete signals yet that a long-rumored transfer of Japanese warships to the Philippine Navy is no longer just talk behind closed doors. It is moving into reality. Today, we break down exactly what is happening to JS Sendai, why its weapons are being removed, what this signals about Japan's intentions, what the Philippines stands to gain, and how this single hull fits into a much larger shift in regional security dynamics. Stay until the end, because this story is not about one ship. It is about a turning point. To understand why JS Sendai matters, we need to begin with its origins. JS Sendai is the fourth ship of the Abukuma-class, commissioned into the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force in 1990. On paper, it carries the designation Destroyer Escort, but that label can be misleading. The Abukuma-class was not designed as a blue water strike destroyer. It was designed for a very specific role. Fire control and weapons employment. This is not a downgrade, this is deliberate. Japan does not remove weapons from an active frontline ship without a reason. Armament removal is expensive, time-consuming, and in many cases irreversible without significant reinvestment. You do not strip a ship of its teeth unless its future role is fundamentally changing. In this case, the message is clear. JS Sendai is no longer being prepared for frontline Japanese service. It is being prepared for transition. Japan's defense export policies provide the first key to understanding why this is happening. Even after Tokyo relaxed its post-war restrictions on defense exports, Japan remains extremely cautious about transferring offensive weapons. Platforms, such as ships, aircraft, or vehicles, are treated differently from weapon systems, ammunition, and strike capabilities. Transferring a hull is politically manageable, transferring missiles is not. By removing weapons before any handover, Japan stays firmly within legal and political boundaries. It avoids domestic backlash, limits escalation narratives, and frames the transfer as defensive capacity building rather than power projection. In other words, the ship becomes a symbol of partnership, not provocation. There is a second, equally important reason for the removal of weapons. Interoperability. The Philippine Navy does not operate Japanese combat systems. Japanese missiles, fire control radars, and anti-submarine weapons are deeply integrated into Japan's own logistics, training pipelines, and industrial base. Leaving these systems installed would create immediate problems. Maintenance dependency on Japan, spare parts bottlenecks, training mismatches, doctrine conflicts. By stripping the ship down before transfer, Japan gives the Philippines something far more valuable than a ready-made warship. It gives a blank canvas. The Philippine Navy can choose its own systems. Western, mixed origin, or locally supported, compatible with existing doctrine. Upgradable on its own timeline. This approach avoids long-term dependence and gives Manila real control over the platform's future. The third reason is the most telling of all. Weapons removal signals intent. Ships that are meant to remain in service keep their armament. Ships being prepared for retirement, transfer, or repurposing do not. The fact that JS Sendai is undergoing this process strongly suggests that diplomatic discussions between Japan and the Philippines are already well advanced. This is not exploratory, this is execution. To understand why the Philippines is such a logical recipient, we need to look at the current state of the Philippine Navy. The Navy is in the middle of a difficult transition phase. New frigates are entering service, but slowly. Legacy platforms are aging out faster than replacements can arrive. Capability gaps exist not because of poor planning, but because modernization takes time, money, and political consistency. The Abukuma-class fits into this gap almost perfectly. These ships are larger and more capable than offshore patrol vessels, simpler and cheaper to operate than modern frigates, and well-suited for patrol, escort, and presence missions. With proper refit, they could perform a wide range of tasks that currently stretch the Philippine Navy's limited fleet. They could patrol contested waters without tying down high-end assets. They could escort supply ships and Coast Guard vessels. They could support maritime domain awareness in critical choke points. This is not about prestige. This is about numbers, presence, sustainability. In maritime security, showing up matters. The most likely sequence of events is already becoming clear. First, weapons removal continues on selected Abukuma-class ships, including JS Sendai. Second, joint inspections are conducted to validate hull integrity, propulsion systems, and remaining service life. Third, the Philippine Navy selects a limited number of ships, likely fewer than 6, based on budget, crew availability, and refit capacity. Fourth, the ships are transferred in a non-combat configuration. Fifth, rearmament and systems integration decisions are made domestically based on Philippine doctrine and funding realities. This is a multi-year process. It is not symbolic, it is structural. The timing of this development is impossible to ignore. China has increased naval and Coast Guard pressure in contested waters. Japan has deepened security ties with Southeast Asia. The Philippines has accelerated its defense modernization under its Re-Horizon program. All of these trends intersect here. For Japan, transferring aging but capable platforms to a trusted partner extends regional stability without deploying additional Japanese forces. For the Philippines, acquiring proven hulls accelerates capability growth without waiting decades for new construction. For the region, it strengthens the balance without crossing escalation thresholds. This is quiet deterrence. JS Sendai, if transferred, will not arrive as a finished warship. It will arrive as potential, a Cold War escort reborn as a modern regional patrol combatant. Rebuilt, rearmed, repurposed. What happens next will depend entirely on how the Philippine Navy chooses to use that potential. Will it be a stopgap, filling temporary gaps until new ships arrive? Or will it become a force multiplier, expanding presence and resilience for years to come? That decision has not yet been made. But one thing is clear. The removal of weapons from JS Sendai is not the end of its story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, and this chapter will not be written in Tokyo alone. It will be written at sea. What makes the JS Sendai situation especially significant is not just what is being removed, but what is being left behind. The hull remains intact. The propulsion systems remain operational. The sensors, navigation suites, and core ship systems are preserved. This means Japan is not discarding the ship. It is preserving its value. Navies do not behave this way with platforms they consider obsolete. Truly obsolete ships are scrapped, sunk as targets, or stripped indiscriminately. What is happening to JS Sendai is selective, precise, and intentional. Every removed system aligns with export restrictions, interoperability concerns, and future customization. This tells us something important. Japan still believes the Abukuma-class has years of useful life left. From a technical standpoint, the Abukuma-class occupies a rare middle ground that many navies struggle to fill. These ships are large enough to remain stable in rough seas, carry helicopters or UAV support infrastructure, and sustain multi-day patrols. At the same time, they are small enough to operate close to shore, maneuver in constrained waters, and avoid the high operating costs associated with modern frigates and destroyers. For the Philippines, this matters enormously. The West Philippine Sea is not a single open ocean battlefield. It is a patchwork of reefs, shoals, narrow passages, and contested zones where persistence is more important than raw firepower. A ship that can stay on station, show the flag, escort civilian vessels, and respond quickly to incidents is often more valuable than a heavily armed platform that must be used sparingly. The Abukuma-class is built for that kind of presence. Another often overlooked advantage is crew size. Modern warships are manpower intensive. Recruiting, training, and retaining skilled sailors is one of the biggest hidden costs of naval expansion. The Abukuma-class was designed during an era when Japan already faced demographic pressure, so these ships were optimized for relatively small crews compared to their capability. This aligns well with Philippine Navy realities. Smaller crews mean faster operationalization, less strain on personnel pipelines, lower long-term operating costs. In modernization planning, these factors can be just as decisive as weapons and sensors. Critically, the stripped-down configuration also allows the Philippines to tailor the ship's role based on evolving threats rather than inherited doctrine. Rearmament does not have to mirror the original Japanese loadout. The Philippine Navy could prioritize surface surveillance and endurance rather than anti-ship strike. It could emphasize anti-submarine awareness in specific choke points. It could integrate systems already in service to simplify logistics. This flexibility is rare in second-hand acquisitions, where navies often inherit systems they neither want nor can fully support. Here, the Philippines inherits a hull and a choice. The regional implications extend beyond bilateral cooperation. Other Southeast Asian navies are watching closely. A successful transfer and integration of Abukuma-class ships would set a precedent. It would demonstrate that aging but capable platforms can be redistributed among partners in a way that strengthens collective security without triggering arms races. This is particularly relevant at a time when shipbuilding capacity is constrained globally. New warships take years to design, fund, and construct. Transferring existing hulls accelerates capability in months rather than decades. In strategic terms, time matters. There is also a symbolic layer that should not be underestimated. Japan, for decades constrained by its post-war defense posture, is now finding ways to contribute more actively to regional security without abandoning its legal and political foundations. Supporting the Philippine Navy with platforms rather than weapons allows Japan to remain consistent with its principles while adapting to new realities. For the Philippines, accepting such platforms signals growing trust and alignment without formal alliance escalation. This is partnership by design, not by declaration. If JS Sendai and its sister ships are transferred, their arrival will not make headlines with missile launches or dramatic exercises. Instead, their impact will be felt quietly. More hulls at sea, more patrol days logged, more consistent presence in contested areas. In maritime disputes, consistency is power. Ships that show up repeatedly shape behavior. They normalize presence. They reduce gray zones where ambiguity thrives. Over time, this changes calculations on all sides. Ships that show up repeatedly shape behavior. They normalize presence. They reduce gray zones where ambiguity thrives. Over time, this changes calculations on all sides. The most important question, however, remains unanswered. What will the Philippines choose to do with this opportunity? Rearmament decisions will reflect doctrine, budget realities, and political will. Choices made here will determine whether these ships become lightly armed patrol escorts or fully integrated combatants capable of operating alongside modern frigates. Either path has value, but each leads to a different future force structure. JS Sendai's stripped decks tell a story without words, a story of transition, of shifting responsibilities, of quiet preparation rather than loud announcements. This is how real strategic change often happens, not with declarations, but with decisions made in shipyards, committee rooms, and long-term plans. The steel remains, the purpose is changing, and somewhere ahead, a ship that once guarded Japan's seas may soon be helping guard another nation's future. There is a tendency to view second-hand warship transfers as compromises, as leftovers, as symbols of limitation rather than intent. But this view misunderstands how modern naval power is actually built, especially for countries operating under real-world constraints. Naval power is not measured by the newest hull alone. It is measured by days at sea, by coverage, by persistence. A navy with 3 modern frigates that can only deploy 1 at a time is often less effective than a navy with 8 capable ships that can rotate continuously. This is the reality facing the Philippine Navy today, and this is exactly where the Abukuma-class changes the equation. JS Sendai was designed for endurance, not spectacle. Its propulsion system prioritizes fuel efficiency. Its hull form emphasizes stability at patrol speeds. Its internal layout was designed to reduce crew fatigue during long deployments. These design choices may seem mundane, but in contested waters they are decisive. A ship that can remain on station for days longer than expected exerts pressure without firing a shot. It forces responses, it changes behavior. For the Philippines, which must patrol vast maritime zones with limited assets, endurance is force multiplication. Another critical factor is survivability. The Abukuma-class does not rely on stealth or heavy armor. Instead, its survivability comes from redundancy, compartmentalization, and damage control philosophy rooted in Cold War lessons. These ships were built with the expectation of operating under threat, not in permissive environments. Even stripped of weapons, the underlying survivability features remain. Fire suppression systems, compartmentalized machinery spaces, redundant power and propulsion elements. This makes the platform resilient, even when operating close to contested zones where accidents, collisions, or harassment incidents are real risks. Then there is the question of helicopters. While the Abukuma-class does not feature a full hangar like modern frigates, it was designed to support helicopter operations for anti-submarine warfare and surveillance. With modifications, this capability could be adapted for unmanned aerial vehicles, rotary wing support, or maritime surveillance drones. This is where modernization choices become strategic. A single UAV launch and recovery capability dramatically expands a ship's awareness bubble. It allows a patrol ship to see beyond the horizon, document incidents, and respond with information rather than speculation. In the West Philippine Sea, information is often more powerful than firepower. It is also important to understand what this transfer is not. This is not Japan offloading liabilities. This is not a symbolic gesture. This is not a short-term political signal. Japan is methodical. When it prepares a ship for transfer, it calculates reputational risk, operational value, and long-term partnership impact. A failed transfer would damage credibility not only with the Philippines, but with every regional partner watching. The fact that weapons removal is happening at all indicates confidence that the receiving Navy can actually use the ship effectively. Internally, this move also aligns with Japan's own fleet evolution. Japan is introducing newer, more capable platforms. As these enter service, older escorts become less optimal for Japan's high-end requirements, but remain perfectly suitable for regional patrol and escort roles elsewhere. Rather than scrapping these ships, Japan is converting sunk cost into strategic leverage. This is efficient power projection. From the Philippine perspective, accepting these ships also signals maturity. It reflects a shift away from purely aspirational procurement toward pragmatic force building. Not every ship needs to be a flagship. Some ships need to be reliable, present, and affordable. This is how navies grow sustainably. Critically, this transfer also reshapes training and doctrine. Operating Abukuma-class ships would expose Philippine crews to Japanese design philosophies, maintenance standards, and operational concepts. Over time, this cross-pollination raises professionalism, safety culture, and operational discipline. These effects compound quietly but powerfully. A navy does not modernize only through hardware. It modernizes through habits. The long-term implications are even broader. If this transfer succeeds, it opens the door to follow-on cooperation. Joint refit programs, shared maintenance knowledge, training exchanges, doctrine alignment. Over time, this creates interoperability not through treaties, but through practice. This is how regional security networks actually form. Now consider the alternative. If the Philippines does not acquire these ships, the gap remains. Patrol days remain limited, presence remains stretched. Modern frigates continue to perform tasks they were never meant to do, accelerating wear and reducing readiness. In naval planning, opportunity cost is often invisible until it becomes unavoidable. JS Sendai represents a chance to reduce that cost. The stripped decks, the empty launchers, the quiet shipyard work all point to the same conclusion. This is not a ship being downgraded. This is a ship being reassigned. From one strategic context to another, from one navy's past to another navy's future. And when the hull finally leaves Japanese waters, it will not be carrying missiles or torpedoes. It will be carrying something far more consequential. Time, presence, options. And in maritime strategy, those are the currencies that matter most. If you want the next expansion to go even deeper, we can continue into detailed rearmament pathways and realistic weapon fits, peso-level cost estimates and refit timelines, comparison against existing Philippine Navy frigates and patrol vessels, how these ships would change daily operations in the West Philippine Sea, or a forward-looking scenario of how the fleet might look 5 to 10 years after transfer.